Welcome to Your City on Community 7 Television. I'm Schutz Wies and I'm your host. Each month, we delve into a different aspect of what's going on within the city of Billings. This month, we're very excited to have Kevin Ploehn with us. Kevin is the Director of Aviation and Transit with the city of Billings. And now, obviously, with the pandemic going on, being the director at the airport and the transit is probably going to be a pretty interesting position over the last year. So, Kevin, thank you so much for coming in to visit with us, and I can't wait to dive into some of this stuff.
Sounds good. Let's get going.
All right. Well, we were talking a little bit earlier that we're coming up kind of on a year here. So tell us a little bit, just give us the overview, the history, kind of what has happened at the Billings Airport over the course of the last year. What have you seen up, down, around, all that kind of stuff? Just give us some good background.
Well, the last year has been very interesting. I mean, we went from having record numbers in January and February to all of a sudden diving in March to 2,300 passengers in April.
Wow.
And planing passengers.
Wow.
And then slowly working our way back, I think 7,500 in planing passengers in May, and then finally 13,000. And then we finally got up, by July, we were right around 24,000, which is about half of what we normally have. And then it just kind of stayed in that area through the rest of the year in the 20,000 range, which we were glad to see, honestly.
Yeah.
But I can tell you last April, I was sweating bullets. Man, oh man, I had no idea what we were going to do.
Sure.
I mean, it's like someone just took and pulled the rug out from you. Because, the airport's dependent on passengers for a good portion of their revenues, parking, car rentals, food, beverages, and gifts, all those things come into our for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then what was really interesting is the airlines stopped flying somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really restricted what was going on, and so that's our landing fees and a few other things. So it's right in the middle of budget time. I was scratching my head a little bit, so it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to get more into the pandemic. Thanks for giving us kind of some background there. But let's broaden out. Let's go up on an airplane, 30,000 feet, and let's talk a little bit about what is it? Why does the city of Billings need an airport? What role do you guys play within the city of Billings, and why is it the responsibility of the city to have an airport here?
Well, I can tell you that a community without an airport has a lot of trouble with economic development. An airport is a huge economic engine. I mean, if you just look at what happens at our airport outside of the passengers, there is a lot of stuff that's going on. We have medical flights that come in. We do a lot of freight. Mm-hmm. Like, we are the freight hub, freight king of Montana. Yeah. And so just those things, that commerce, not even including all the business that takes place with people traveling, really has an impact on what's going on in your community. So without your airport, it's really hard to grow your community. Every vibrant airport is in a vibrant community for the most part.
Sure. I would think it's nice to have, I guess, one entity that's dealing with not only passenger air, but also the freight, and I'm assuming there's private people that fly in and out of that airport. And it's a diverse group of users who do use that airport, and you guys provide that stability to have all of those facilities there.
Yeah, we're the facility provider. That's our job. And then it's similar to the highway department building a road. The road's there for everybody to use. Same thing with us, other than we charge people to use it a little bit. Sure. So that we can break even and cover the costs of snow removal, painting the lines, all those things, asphalt repairs. So we're basically a big landlord. Yeah. And everybody that's on the airport's paying something to be there.
Sure. Give us a little history. How long have we had an airport? What were some of the first airlines that flew in here? Kind of give us some background, some history.
Well, the early aviation history is kind of interesting because it started in about 1912 when Dr. Bell flew his first little airplane around, and then it kind of just started growing pretty quick after that. So there was landing strips about where Billings Clinic is, down by the sugar beet factory. There was one over there by about Pauley and Rehberg. There was another landing strip. So people were trying to figure out where should the airport be. And about 1927, they decided, okay, it needed to be up on the rims. And so the city of Billings bought 400 acres up there. And then they went to work in building an airport. And the next year it opened, and it was 1928. So that was the official opening of the Billings Airport. Yeah. They one of the people that they bought the land from and who ended up donating some land was a guy named Logan. And Dick Logan, was then named the airport director. Oh. So he was the director from 1928 till his death in 1957. Okay. And so he helped develop that airport, get it up and running. And interesting, once the airport was established, we started getting air service. So we had Wyoming Air Service out of Cheyenne and Casper started coming up here. Inland Air, which then was in Western Air, and then Northwest Airlines. So those are the first four. Interestingly, they 3 of them got eaten up by each other, and then eventually Delta. So, yeah. So anyways, yeah, that was how it started. A lot of it was mail runs, and then slowly built into commercial service where people were actually getting on planes once that novelty started to kind of go, wow, this looks like something we could do. So
yeah. So then walk us through. Let's maybe walk back to the year before the pandemic started. Where are we at with the airport? The year before, obviously, this last year has just been cuckoo crazy. But the year before that, where were we at with the airport? Kind of how many airlines do you have flying in? How much usage is going on? Where were we at before this recent craziness?
Well, 2019 was a record setter for us in all categories. So we had record passengers, record freight. We were in the process of doing all the planning and getting the construction project started that we were working on. We kicked that off in September of 19. And we were just great guns forward. We thought, and when we were planning for the construction project, we had a different cap on at that point. We were looking at, okay, how do we manage 450,000 enplaning passengers, 900,000 for the year. How do we manage that while we're building this terminal building? And so we had some head scratching going on there. When the pandemic hit, kind of changed things a little bit. It's like, okay, now we don't have quite as many passengers, so maybe it'll be easier, but it turns out it really wasn't too much easier. Sure. But yeah, we were in growth mode in a major league way, trying to figure out how we're going to accommodate not only passenger growth, but freight growth too, which we're still working on.
Yeah. Has that, over the course of the pandemic, over the course of last year, I would, if I'm just guessing out there, I'm going to guess that the freight growth actually grew because people are ordering more. They're not going to the stores. They're not going there. But am I right about that?
You are. Yep. And actually, it was kind of bizarre. So initially, just like everything else in April, everything took a dip. Yeah. It was like people didn't know what was going on, and everybody just pulled in their horns and said, oh no. Yeah. But then right after that, people are going, well, if I'm stuck at home, I guess I can do some online shopping. And sure enough, yeah, those numbers started to rise. So we ended up being about 11% higher than the year before with just freight activity. So about 56,000 tons of freight were brought into Billings.
Sure. All right. So then let's talk about on the passenger side of things. I know you had mentioned, in April, it really kind of went back. How were you, what conversations are you having with the airlines and their safety protocol and your safety protocol at this airline or at this airport versus what are the safety protocols at the airport they're going to, and how do you meet those type of things? How were those conversations taking place to make sure that when I got on the airplane, it was safe for me to also get off the airplane?
So that was the most interesting part of it all, is nobody knew exactly what to do. There wasn't any guidance per se. Some stuff was coming out of the CDC, but mostly it was that, wear a mask, wear a mask, wear a mask, and then wash your hands, sanitize. Yeah. So then, we started watching, I spent a lot of time reading about what other airports were doing, and we started seeing that, the screens in front of all the ticket counters, the plexiglass, so that, started putting some of that in. We started putting hand sanitizer everywhere right away. Yeah. Instantly, one of the things we did, because one of the things I didn't want to do was lay off anybody during this, because I didn't know where it was headed until I had a better feel. So the first thing we said is, okay, we had a custodial staff that wasn't following around a crowd of people anymore. We started doing some very deep cleaning, getting everything as clean and sanitized as we could. And then we started to find out that's what everybody was doing. And then the airlines figured out that if they were going to get anybody to fly, they had to show that their flight was safe. And so that's when they started doing, the ionizing, the in between flights, and knocking down any bacteria or germs that could be in there. And so the sanitizing piece of it really kicked off. and everything kind of started melding together. The only issue was there was no uniformity with the wearing of masks. Some airports were demanding that happened.
Yeah.
Some were saying, well, once you get past screening, you got to wear a mask. Of course, when the president, I think it was on January 21st, issued his directive that any transportation hub now had to have a mask.
Yeah.
That pretty much ended that. Everybody's wearing a mask now when you come into the airport.
And then what about some of maybe the federal agencies that are operating in and around the airport? I'm talking about TSA, your check through the FAA, who's in the tower up there. Were there things you had to work through with them? Is TSA going to come to you and say, hey, we're not screening anybody if they're not wearing a mask? Or talk to me about what those discussions were like.
There was some of that, and it was kind of a migration. So initially, they started wearing masks and face shields. But, across the country, they were getting a lot of agents that were getting sick.
Yeah.
And so they started ramping up things in a big way. They actually changed how people screen. They no longer want to touch any of your stuff if they don't have to.
Sure.
So that's why now you're holding the ID for them when you go through, and they've put in CT scanners, which are just a tad bit slower, but they're way more thorough. So they can basically turn that image of that suitcase upside down, inside out, and they're very good that way.
Yeah.
And they started making you pull things out that they know are going to cause hits. Food, for example, is one thing. Anything in tin foil, so that they wouldn't have to touch anything.
Sure.
It wasn't until recently when they started enforcing that you had to wear a mask through the screening deal, and we had some incidences where the people didn't want to wear a mask, and we had to send our police officers down. But when you have a officer in blue, it makes it happen a little lot quicker.
Sure. Yeah.
So it worked out pretty well.
Okay. What about food service and stuff like that? Did that have to just shut down for a while, or what kind of process did you go through with that, having those places open while people are in the airport?
So initially when the county health agent, John Felton, closed everything, I went, wait a minute, we got an airport and there's people coming through and it might want to eat.
Yeah.
So I had to actually call him and talk to him a little bit about what we could do. And we negotiated that, we'll keep the land side, the public side closed for the time being, but we'll still allow the deli upstairs to serve food and stuff for what few passengers were flowing through the building at the time.
Yeah.
And so that we basically kind of followed what the county was doing in terms of all the other things. But we did have food service through the whole issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
So.
right. I mean, were they doing a lot of, prepared, that sandwich is all wrapped up and you can just grab it and take it? I would assume a lot of stuff like that.
Some of that, yeah. They have like quick fryer, I don't know, like George Foreman hamburger press things, those kind of deals, panini presses.
Sure.
So they could do some hot sandwiches, that kind of stuff. But yeah, mostly it was quick food, quick to grab. And you got to remember, the April, May, June, there wasn't a lot of people going through there, so it was pretty simple for them to maintain.
Sure. Now, what about on the car rental side of things? I mean, I would assume they're going to see a big dip, just like, if there's less people flying into the airport, there's less people that need a car to rent as well.
Well, so when I was doing my budget and I was pulling everything way down, they were the one anomaly that I probably got too far down on.
Oh, okay.
They actually came in right around about 70% of the year before.
Yeah.
And part of that had to do with people coming here this summer and and through the fall. Initially, wasn't a lot of notice about Montana having any COVID.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people were going, gosh, where do we want to have a vacation and where we can stretch out our legs and take off a mask and not be near anybody. And well, if you start pointing at states with no people in them, we're one of them.
Yeah.
And so I think we got a bigger boost from the travel industry than, say, a lot of the other states.
Sure.
So, because most of the four bigger airports in Montana did fairly well during this last year.
Sure.
I mean, Kalispell was like 75% of the year before. Missoula was around 62 or 3% of the year before. We were about 56, and Missoula was right around 51%. So, I mean, when the rest of the nation is only doing 30% or less, we looked pretty good. So people were actually coming here. And so what that meant was a lot of people were renting cars and going and touring the state. So, we have over the last few years, really been pushing, come to Billings, take the Beartooth, and go in the north entrance to Yellowstone instead of down to Gallatin Valley.
Yeah.
And I think we've started to see some really I think that started to grab a little bit because we saw some of that.
So you talked a little bit about how Montana airports kind of did better than what was expected. Across the nation, are the hubs really taking big hits too, or is it really those spoke locations like Billings, but maybe doesn't have the appeal of a Montana that you can really spread out? Are those the ones that are really seeing the problem? I imagine the hubs are. I mean, I'm sure they're down, but they've got that just baseline of travel.
Yeah. Some of the hubs really took a hit, especially in like New York. I mean, things in New York just wrapped up. I saw some numbers there, and I just went, wow. In fact, there was a video on YouTube of this lady. It was like a Saturday in LaGuardia, and she's walking around. And she walked around for like 10 minutes before she saw another person in that whole airport.
Wow.
So it's like, yep, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that bad in Billings or the rest of Montana. But yeah, the hubs, a lot of what was happening too is, since there wasn't any business travel, the airlines started figuring out if we're going to make any money at all, we got to cater to the leisure market. And so the ones that were nimble enough to just do a point-to-point for leisure really did pretty well.
Yeah.
Like Allegiant, for example,
Sure.
because they fly direct flights wherever they go.
Yeah.
The hub market, not as much. I mean, I think the hubs, they were down just like everybody else, but our major area carriers that had hub activity tended to be lower than the rest, with one exception, and that was American. And American brought in that second flight from Dallas last summer.
Yeah.
And those two flights averaged about 85% load factors.
Wow.
And so I'm giving some kudos to Visit Billings and the Chamber because they had previously done a great marketing program down there to bring people to Montana.
Sure.
And apparently it caught fire because we were busy with a lot of people using that flight last summer.
And I'm going to ask you this, even though this doesn't really affect the Billings Airport, but I know you might have some insight into it. Those big carriers who do kind of, I would expect, get a lot of revenue from international flights. I mean, is it just done? Like I mean, you're just not flying out of the country at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. Yeah, the international flights for most of those airlines were pretty big money makers.
Yeah.
And that pretty much got cut off at the knees. Heck, you can't even fly into Canada.
Right.
So I mean, it's a real challenge, and it's going to take a minute for that to come back. I think the first thing you're going to see is domestic travel, because I believe there's some pent-up demand for people to get out and go do things.
Yeah.
You can still go south of the border, pretty easy.
Yeah.
You still have to get the testing done and make sure you don't have COVID, but you can go that way. But going north or going across the ocean, very difficult.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of changed the dynamics, and of course, when you go south, it's mostly leisure travel.
Sure.
And so that's what you're seeing is just everybody's leisure travel right now, and that's what the airlines are chasing.
Yeah. So what are you kind of seeing, kind of coming, it seems like we are, I guess, a little bit pulling out of this. Are you starting to see numbers come back again? Are you starting to see business travels, or is it just all that leisure travel that it was before? What are you starting to see emerge at the airport right now?
Well, right now it's been all leisure for the most part. I mean, there's a few people that are traveling for business, but it's nothing like normal. I mean, in the winter time is when we really notice it.
Right.
Billings, January and February, you're not having a lot of leisure.
Yeah.
You pick it up again in March.
Sure.
But during that time frame, it's pretty much the hardcore traveler
Yeah.
that's doing business here and there, and that's not there.
Yeah.
So January, we were down. I think we did 18,800 enplaning passengers. So, and in February is probably going to be similar.
Yeah.
But I'm anticipating that March hits. You'll see how much of an impact that had when the leisure travel starts to take up. One of the things I'm thinking there will be some activity because this is the first year in a while that School District 2 has actually had a spring break. And so I'm pretty sure we're going to see a little uptick come March, and then I think that'll carry on through the rest of the year.
Right. All right, is that kind of what the airlines are expecting too? Is that this is just going to kind of ramp up as vaccinations roll out, as we kind of get to where we're back opening up again? Are they kind of planning for that as well?
They are. I've been kind of watching what their flight schedules are looking like going into the future, and they are starting to do more of that, where they're going to have covering more of their schedule, numerous flights during the day.
Sure.
It's So I'm thinking they're anticipating some of that because, like we said, we're a leisure market type thing right now, and it's a good place to go, and which is great. I mean, we want to help the tourism industry as much as we can because they took a hit.
Yeah, absolutely, positively. What's something you learned about the airport, having worked there for a long time, that you learned about the airport during COVID that you didn't know before COVID?
Well, I've been at the airport now for 26 years, and during that time frame, one of the things I always thought was that other than 911, I thought there was no way that we'd ever have no passengers in the building.
Yeah.
I mean, it just didn't even occur to me.
Yeah.
I mean, after 911, it was just basically the air service, or
Yeah.
everything was stopped.
Yeah.
3-day stop, nothing. So that was expected.
Sure.
But this was like, holy smokes, what happened here? And so, the one thing I learned was that don't take anything for granted. Because we went from having 30-some passengers a month down to 2,300. So it's. Yeah, that's what I learned.
Anything that has changed about how the airport operates or interacts with freight or interacts with airlines that's changed during the pandemic that you're sitting there going, even when this is done, this isn't a bad way to go. We're gonna kind of keep doing these type of things. Something you found out during the pandemic, it's been a good change, and you're probably going to keep it going forward.
Yeah, I think most of the sanitizing stuff will take place and continue to do that. I mean, people are going to be a little phobic of it initially, to even get people flying again. I mean, there's a group of people that will not fly for a while because they want to make sure that they're safe. And I think they're going to have to continue to do that same sanitizing program that's been going on forever, for the last year anyways, to get those people to feel comfortable enough to get on a flight.
Sure.
So I think that'll continue to happen. It'll happen at the airport too.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we did is we put in one of those ultraviolet hand sanitizers on our escalators so that, it's just, the whole sanitizing thing just kind of kicked into higher gear, and I think it'll continue.
Okay. One of the things I did want to touch on, because I know this is a big deal in Billings, is essential air service. Talk to us a little bit about what is essential air service and how, if at all, was that affected during the pandemic, given that the name of it is Essential Air Service?
Well, the Essential Air Service program came into place right after deregulation in 1979, and what it did was guarantee for 2 years at the time that anybody that had scheduled service would continue to have that scheduled service, even though the market was now deregulated and people could do whatever they wanted as an airline.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it never went away, and then it became a subsidized program. And so, for those people that have it, it's kind of a lifeline for them. One of the things that was really interesting to see was I wanted to see how much that impacted, the COVID event impacted that. And they fared way better than the rest of it.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's a lifeline type flight for them. Most of those people use those flights because they're very economical. I mean, you can get them from anywhere from $25 to $50 to come to Billings.
Yeah.
And so, if you have health issues, banking, attorneys, whatever your issues are, entertainment, it's really quite cheap to get on those planes. So most of them were only down, like Sydney was down like about 28% is all.
Sure.
And I think the worst one was maybe Havre at around 39%. So they continued to utilize that service, which was great. Now, the only time they didn't utilize that service was last week when it was 25 below, and they took 3 days off of no flying.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it probably would not have been good that way.
It would have been a cold flight.
Yeah. What are you doing this year? I mean, I know last year probably we're pulling way back on the budget. What are you doing budget-wise this year with things maybe wrapping back up again? Are you going to try and play it real safe and just go with a budget that is kind of a worst-case scenario, or did you build some cushion in saying, I think this is going to get better?
I actually think it's going to get better, and I'm looking at doing that with my budget. I have my staff kind of do the first blush on where they think revenues are going to be, and I said, I think we're going to raise that a little bit because I really do see that. I'm projecting that we'll probably be 70% of 2019's numbers as opposed to 56% we were last year. So, I'm trying to get those numbers across my revenue spectrum to kind of reflect that.
Sure.
One of the benefits, we got the CARES Act, and when I looked at that, you could have used it for development purposes, but I said, after an event like this, it could take a while to come back.
Yeah.
So I've basically planned on using those COVID or those care funds for at least 3 years to buffer our budget. And so that's what we're doing. So I mean, it's been a godsend. I mean,
Sure. Yeah. What is something, I guess, you would like the traveling public to be out there? We touched on this a little bit, that it may be a while before someone feels completely comfortable to come up to the airport. But what would you want them to know about coming up to the airport, jumping on a flight, going wherever they wanted to know, to make them feel maybe a little bit more comfortable about doing that?
So, you know, now that there's a mandatory mask deal, everybody's wearing their masks at the airport. And then, you know, there was just a study here a week or two ago by Harvard where they pointed out that, you know, you have a better chance of getting COVID going to the grocery store than you do flying on an airplane. I mean, it's very safe, the way they circulate the air, the way it's picked up by HEPA filters. So very unlikely that you'll catch it on the flight. So, and if you have a place to go or you know you're comfortable going, should be good.
Okay.
Should be a good, you know, so I think a lot of people are finding that out. The ones that are flying are coming back and flying again.
Yeah, I know. My brother flies fairly often, and he said some of the times the most comfortable he feels is when he's on the plane. So
Yeah.
I know that's probably not going to be everybody's reality, but I do think that, you know, the airport and the airlines have worked really hard to try and make that.
Absolutely. It was the only way we're going to get people back in the seats.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've touched on this aspect a little bit too, but let's go a little bit beyond, okay, what's going to ramp up over the summer? What do you see coming to the airport next 3 to 5 year time horizon? What's out there that's on the agenda for the airport going forward?
Well, at the beginning of that horizon, 3 years out, we'll have a new terminal building, or at least a new concourse area, so we'll be able to accommodate, if more flights want to come in, we'll be able to accommodate that because we'll have 8 gates now. So that's one plus. And then I foresee that you know, there's been probably a change in culture a little bit. You know, online shopping was taking place and has been taking place and kind of got kicked into high gear during the pandemic. And I don't see that backing off much. So we'll continue to see growing freight numbers.
Yeah.
And the airline and the supporters of the 2 big carriers, FedEx and UPS, are all ramping up as well. They're trying to buy more planes. They're building hangars up at the airport right now. So, yeah, that industry is going to continue to grow, and you're going to see a lot more freight activity, which is fine. You know, the airport's, that's what it's for, and, you know, we got a lot of capacity on that large 2-mile runway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're going to continue to see, because Billings is growing. And, you know, heck, my sister's a realtor, and she said she's selling houses to people that don't even come to town to buy them. So, you know, if that kind of thing going on, you're just going to continue to see an expansion of the population base, and when that happens, the airport grows as well. So, we're a steady Eddie, always have been, and actually that's a good way to manage something as opposed to the huge growth that some of the airports around the state have experienced or are experiencing. I'd rather be doing that here than there. So anyways, I think we'll continue to see growth, and, you know, it's just going to be all aces.
All right, good deal. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for coming down to visit with us. I'm sure it's been an interesting year, and you know, thank you for all that you and your staff do at the airport to keep the airport open for those people that had to travel, and to continue to make it a safe place for us to go as we come out of this. So thank you very much for all you do.
Absolutely. Yep, that's what we do.